sees them are Russia and China, but also to some extent a reconfigured Europe. The US really is failing now in its operations abroad, and that surveillance is trying to stay ahead of the possible competitors. Empires are always obsessed about competitors, and so this surveillance is like the imprisonment as a function of control of their own societies. The surveillance is about controlling their own societies and also seeing what their competitors are up to, and the great fear that they're going to be outflanked empire, really, or a Russian empire in the same way that there is a US empire. But there's always that fear in the minds of those that control systems. And we're talking here not just about who the president or the president of the US is an extraordinary figure that has a lot of executive powers, really. The leader of an empire is always a type of dictator. But the other side to that is to look at the fact that, for example, the promises of Barack Obama in 2 long terms with a strong mandate, the promises to close down the torture center in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. The Cubans have always said this is an illegally annexed part of their territory, and Obama did promise to close it down. He hasn't been able to do that. Just as he wasn't able to create a public health system in the United States, which adds to the problems of US citizens there. So there's something else we have to recognize, that the leader of this system sometimes appears quite impotent to do things that he's promised openly to do, such as close down the torture center in Guantanamo. Well, the NSA surveillance that you mentioned is part of this broader mechanism of control that really has its own momentum, and it's not just to do with any particular political figures. So that surveillance is an important part of control. Of course, technologically, it's much more advanced these days. Our conversations now are being recorded by the NSA. We can be sure of that. That concept of privacy that existed in the past doesn't really exist anymore. We're all in this sort of global fishbowl, and we have to be prepared to recognize that things we say in any conversation, public or private, is going to be under surveillance.
Right. Thank you so much for the explanation. Teresa, are you still with us?
Yep.
Has this,
Yes.
I mean, the surveillance of the US government, has this brought more security and safety to the society of the United States, or it's just for the benefit of the government?
You know what my answer is. It's just for the benefit of the government. It has nothing to do with security or safety. Never. They're just trying to control us. It's just a way of suppressing. I think there's a lot of infiltrators, especially I've seen strange things in the Palestinian movement. I don't care. I sort of feel like the prisoners do. Go ahead and anything I got to say, I would make it. I would say right now what I'm saying. I would say it on national TV. I would say it in national newspapers. I would say it on a microphone. The worst thing they can do to me is kill me, and I don't give a damn. So none of this bothers me. They can go ahead and survey my telephone conversations all they want. I don't even care. I mean, I know it's an infringement of my freedom. It's an infringement of my rights. But at some point, they've always done it, and there's actually no way to stop it. And Obama's made it worse.
And do you think there are so many people like you out there in the US?
No, I'm the only one. I'm pretty sure. Okay, in my state, there is very few like me. But there are other places. Like I heard that. Okay, I heard that Chicago is a hotbed of major radicalism. And I actually heard that there in Seattle has pockets of outspoken leaders, but most of the country are terrified and live in fear, and they're broken. But I have a huge battle here every time I've participated in anything, because it's all about fear mongering.
Mm-hmm. So the system of terrifying people in the United States, mainly, especially this kind of surveillance, has been effective to the society, so that the people are really scared.
They're very scared. I mean, in the old days with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they actually said out loud that they would probably pay with their lives. They said it many times. They're on video saying we will probably pay with our lives, but it didn't stop them. It didn't slow them down. Here today, it's a different story. I met Cindy Sheehan. I don't know if you know who Cindy Sheehan. At one point in the Iraq War, and she camped out in front of George Bush's private home in Texas. She built a camp. She got hundreds of people to join her in the camp.
And now I can remember her.
Yeah, okay. I met her and talked with her several times. She's from my state. She lives an hour away from my house. And she's a very, very courageous woman. But even she's afraid. I mean, she expressed a certain amount of fear. I mean, she's outstanding because of what she's done. She's been arrested many, many times. She's gone to the White House. She's told them to their face they're a bunch of warmongering maniacs. She invaded George Bush's private home space, and she's pretty outstanding. She's pretty amazing, but she did express fear. And another one who I've met who is a international leader in many ways, a national leader, is Allison Weir. She's also from my state. She also lives about an hour away from me. And I've met her face to face about 4 or 5 times.
Alison was supposed to be here tonight too, but she didn't manage.
She's very busy. She's under great demand. But also she has some fears because she's been attacked so viciously. And an example of how bad the movement is that the actual Zionists, the actual Jewish or Israelis who do exist in the United States by the millions have not been the worst of her attackers. The worst of her attackers are inside the pro-Palestinian movement. They are the ones who've tried to shut down her speaking engagements and boycott her book. And I mean, I've talked to her and she's amazing. She is a courageous woman, but privately, one-on-one, she's actually told me a couple of times, be careful, be careful, be careful, because they're watching us, they're after us. She said, I wouldn't say publicly what you say, and she's talking to me. And when she's given her speeches, I think she's very, very cautious about how she says things and what she says. She's actually very moderate, but she still gives, you know, what she's good at is giving statistics. I mean, I think a lot of people are afraid that if we just go one stage further than we're at right now, they will start rounding us up. But the alternative is surrender. The alternative is we're barely doing what we need to do now. Even the Cindy Sheehans and Allison Weirs, who are my friends, are so few in this entire country, and Allison Weir and Cindy Sheehan and me are not doing even near enough. So if they're already scaring the most courageous women that I know, and by the way, I don't even know any men in their category at all, except for maybe Steve Salata or Miko Pele, but I don't even put them in the category of Allison Weir or Cindy Sheehan, because I don't know, I have my own feelings about them. I've met them too in person. But I'm just saying we've got to do 10 times more than we're doing, not less. But privately, quietly, face to face, people are afraid.
So, for the moment, there are just 3 of you, Teresa, right?
Well, yeah, we're all doing different things.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not a famous, I will never be a famous person, But what I say publicly goes far beyond what anybody else says publicly. What I say publicly makes Allison blink, makes Cindy go, whoa, whoa, you know, because what I'm saying to you, I will say to the world, and I don't even hold back.
Right.
But, and everybody says, be careful, because they will kill you.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for your brilliant explanation. Okay, now we're going on to the next topic, and that's gun trade. I'm going to ask Michael that in the US, there is a vast freedom of carrying guns. Would it bring more security or safety from, for the ordinary people?
That it has ever been a way of getting more security for the people, just to raise guns and to sell guns like cakes on the street. I think this gunfights and raising and selling guns for nothing is just one method of selling violence as a so-called culture, as a method of just ordinary suppression of people, and so to make people used to the fact that if you do something wrong, you may lose your life easily for nothing, for $5 US. And definitely this is very, very, very typical for United States. This is a difference, one of the biggest differences to most of the European countries, but this is something that they have exported. United States have exported to those countries in the world, especially in the so-called third world, which they dominate, where violence is a daily thing. And this is something like a mirror to the situation in United States. Take the situation in Colombia, for example, or any other country that is very close to the United States. Immediately, as more close they get into the United States, as more violent these societies are getting, as more guns are distributed, and as more aggressive the state in those countries goes after those whom they regard as being opponents. So I think it is a very, very special character of United States imperialist system.
Thank you, Michael. Now let's get back to Tim Anderson. Tim, about religion. Religious minorities, especially Muslims, are constantly being threatened and harassed in the US. Isn't it an example of violation of freedom of belief?
Thank you, Fatima. Yes, it is, and there's a range of discriminations going on in the US and in our country too. But of course, the reason for the hysteria about Muslims and Arabs in Western countries is precisely because of the war, precisely because of the interventions being practiced in Arab and Muslim countries. There's no coincidence there. There's a very strong link. Of course, in this case, because we've had dirty wars in recent years, the dirty war in Libya, the dirty war in Syria, the unusual feature of the anti-Muslim bias is that the most extreme perverted forms of Islam in the Middle East are precisely those supported by Western countries. The Wahhabism from Saudi Arabia, dressed up in different names like the Islamic Front or Jabhat al-Nusra or ISIL, Daesh. Those groups are all, we now know, it's been openly admitted, directly or indirectly supported by the Western countries in their efforts, in this case, to try and overthrow the Syrian state. So the most perverted, distorted forms of Islam are precisely created and fomented by the US in the first instance to try and prevent decent neighbourly relations between Iraq and Iran, for example. That was a creation of George W. Bush back in 2005, 2006 with his vision of the new Middle East. and then the destruction of Libya and the attempted destruction of Syria, fortunately a failed attempt. So it's a peculiar situation where these artificial creations of, particularly the group these days called ISIL or Daesh, in Syria, I was in Syria recently, and the Syrians just refer to them all as Daesh, or the mercenaries, basically. They have different brand names, of course. So that process, that international process, the attempts to try and lock in, control the entire Middle East region, have that backwash effect on Western cultures now. And of course, they've recruited many thousands of followers from particularly European countries, but also from the US and from my country, from Australia. Only an artificial creation to try and bolster, or what's the current rationale is now to some new war on terrorism against the groups created by the imperial powers themselves. So it's a construction to do with war, to do with imperialism. Historically, the deepest racism has always been to do with imperialism and colonization. That's why you need to start with racism in Western culture